Good to see you here today, and I see there's quite a few here, and there's some visitors here. We want you to know that we're glad that you could be here with us today. There may be some of you online that are visiting as well, and we're thrilled that you could be with us. And those of you that some have been coming recently from college campuses, and we're especially thrilled to have you as well. Sometimes when you're away from home, it's difficult to find a place to land your feet, and we want you to know that we are more than welcoming. We want to be more than welcoming here at Washington Avenue for you. So please give us the opportunity to get to know you, and we'll do what we can to support you as best we can. As Alan said, we've got some really good stuff that's been happening, and one of the things I'll dial in on, he took my one on the weather because it has been magnificent. Trees are changing, the weather's perfect. I love that sweet spot of like 65 to 75 degrees. I'm okay when it gets down to 30 as well. I know everyone here loves that temperature too. I can tell by how hot it is in here at the moment. I get hot easy. But we have a couple good things that we want to bring up. As you know, we recently went down to Freed-Hardeman to interview for interns, and we've got two. First of all, we had 4 really good interviews, especially good interviews. And of the ones that we had spoken to, we checked the references, we looked at their theological questions, their personalities, and trying to find 2 things. One, the way that we can best serve them and their growth as young Christians, and the way that they may also help our congregation in growth as well. So there's a relationship in that. Evie Hazel has agreed to be our female intern. This will be the 3rd time we've had a female intern. And if you aren't familiar with that, she will be working with the younger children, with the teen girls, with our ladies, and fulfilling a lot of roles in that regard. And that's been a pretty successful program over the last 2 years. We hope it will be in the 3rd year. She comes to us from Valdosta, Georgia. She's an English major and a Bible major as well. And she's a pretty hard worker. She's in the chorale and many other theater and many other things like that at Freed-Hardeman. And so we're excited that Evie will be coming with us this next summer. Nathan King, he'll be our male intern. And so he'll be doing some ministry stuff as well, and with Evie, he'll be working with the full range of the youth group as well, and we'll have him doing several other tasks around the building. Nathan comes to us from Huntington, I think it is Tennessee. He's a freshman, and he is a biology and Bible major, and we're pretty excited that he'll be coming with us as well. Like I said, both of them passed their background checks. That's safe. The references were good. That's nice. So they're pretty enthusiastic about being here too. So we hope you're anticipating that. So pray for them. They have good semesters, and both have agreed to come up at some point next semester so you can get to know them before the summer hits. So that's good news. Let's jump back into it. You can change a life today. That's the theme that we started last week, and we talked about ways that we could focus on other people and the way that you could change someone's life for the better, for the good. That's a thing that each one of us can take ownership of. And what I hope we remember out of this is an expectation for Christians. There were 3 words that I kept repeating last week, and I'll hit just a little bit this week. And the examples that we had that were instructional, they were aspirational, and they were an expectation. And that's really some of the things that we look forward in the Bible. What is being instructed to us from the Bible? And by aspirational, what's the scope of it? And how big can we get with that? And what's possible for us as individual Christians? What does God empower us to be able to do? I love that aspirational aspect of it, because we don't want to just settle for the least of the requirements, but let's thrive in the midst of that. And if that's God's expectation for us, then by all means, we must all get involved in the ways that God has equipped each one of us to do so. Well, in the same way today, as we're talking about giving patience and peace, there are things today we're going to look at that are instructional and aspirational and an expectation of God. But there's great joy in these things. Great joy in these things. What tests your patience? What tests your patience? And more importantly, when your patience is tested, and maybe it's over some sinful thing that keeps happening and happening and happening. Maybe it's because someone is apathetic or they're lazy, and that really gets you quite a bit. Maybe selfishness. Maybe you've asked someone to do something for the 30th time, the 31st time, the 40th time. How far can my patience go? I get it. And what do you look like when your patience is being tested? It may be one of these 2 figures. It may be somewhere in between, or it may be on either side of them. Patience is important. Biblically speaking, patience is incredibly important. You remember 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the chapter of love. It says love is patient and kind. That's God's definition involving love. Love is patient and kind. It's a critical aspect of love. So we need patience. The writer of Proverbs, Solomon, he writes this in chapter 15, verse 18. Hot tempers cause arguments. Patience brings peace. Or Proverbs 14:29. Whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly. We know that. You may have even experienced that. Have you had a moment where your patience just evaporated, you lost control of your emotions, and it probably wasn't good that occurred afterwards? That's a human thing, isn't it? But we want to minimize that. And more than minimize that, we want to eliminate that. And more than eliminate that, what if we did the opposite and we had godly patience? A godly patience that built up and created a path that created more peace. And when we talk about changing people's lives today, what if the effect of our patience and our peace could be given to others? Or at least create the opportunity for others to see it as well. So that there was a sort of a contagious effect, an influence for the good. What if that could unfold? Man, that would be something special. And so what is instructional and aspirational, and what is expected for us as God's people? There's a myriad of examples of this in the Bible. I mean, myriad. When we think of patience, probably Job, it could be Hannah, it could be Ruth, it could be so many different characters. Obviously Jesus, many of the apostles. But I want us to take a look at Moses. Moses with patience and peace. And I like Moses as an example because we do know quite a bit about Moses and his story over a long period of time. And that allows us to get a bigger picture of what his patience looked like. And to be fair, man, there's moments in which patience was challenging for him. Go with me to Numbers chapter 11. And this is a moment in which the people, he's leading the people, and they've come out of the Exodus. And this is before the 12 spies. So depending on your timeline, this is somewhere between maybe 1 to 2 years after the Exodus, just for some scope on that. And so in the midst of this, there are complaints that are coming from the people. Again, murmuring again. And they're not satisfied with what food that they have. As they've been brought out of slavery to the Egyptians, and they're heading towards the promised land that God had said he would give them. There would be a land overflowing with milk and honey, and that he was providing for them. And there's these complaints, and they're rough. They want meat. The manna is not good enough. In verse 4, they say, now the mixed multitude, so it's a multitude of people who were among them, yielded to intense craving. So the children of Israel also, they wept again, and they said, who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our whole being is dried up, and there's nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. Their hearts were still on Egypt. Their hearts were still back in Egypt in the way they had life before. And Moses' job is not just to lead them out of the Exodus in a physical sense, but there's a spiritual leadership that's unfolding here. The real good is, yes, it is good to come out of what they were going through in Egypt, but it's even better to be going to that place, certainly the physical place that God gives them, but even more so, a transformation in who they are in identity, God's people. What does it mean to be God's people? And what does it mean to have your life redirected away from what you endured and went through in Egypt, in the world, to who you can become in the Lord? It means he was leading them as they were going to the promised land into a transformation towards God, deeper into God. They struggled with this. They struggled. And here they are complaining about meats. And their attention is turned back to Egypt in this. Now, Moses processes this in a way that maybe he thought this was a punishment. Look at what he says to God. Moses heard, verse 10, Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, everyone at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord was greatly aroused, and Moses also was displeased. So Moses said to the Lord, why have you afflicted your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, so that you have laid the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I beget them that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom, and as a guardian carries a nursing child to the land which you swore to our fathers? Where am I to get meat to give all these people? For they weep all over me, saying, give us meat that we may eat. I am not able to bear these people alone, because the burden is too heavy for me. Verse 15, listen to this. This is where he's at in this. If you treat me like this, please kill me here and now, if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness. Moses is struggling a bit here, isn't he? But in the midst of that, in terms of patience and peace and where he's trying to get people, do you notice in the midst of that, he's not putting them down. He's not fully casting them aside. He's struggling with his patience, but he goes to God in the midst of this. He's not understanding what's going on in it. Maybe it seems that he thinks perhaps he's being punished in the midst of this. But he says, this burden's too much for me. I need help here. Well, God answers his prayer. And he takes 70 leaders and he bestows them some level of the gift of the Spirit so they can bear the burden with the people as well. But I love that the Holy Spirit deemed this something to be recorded in the Bible for us. Because even when we see these figures like Moses, which of course, this is Moses, a great figure of the Bible, and all the things that Moses has done in terms of being a leader, we'll hit on some of those in a moment. It's incredible what he's done. But if that guy has these moments, okay, it gives me perspective on when I have those moments, when you have those moments. And so it becomes instructional in the way that we might navigate through those moments to a place that's most pleasing to God. And on top of being most pleasing to God, in a way that we can affect the people around us so that we can change their life for the good as well and bring them peace as well. Moses had a lot of struggles with this. It wasn't like this is a one-off event. It seemed pretty common, actually. Even if you go back to the account like at the Red Sea. If you remember in Exodus chapter 14, this is where they're coming out and the people are murmuring. And of course, here they're coming out physically. There's that moment for the doors open and God's created the path for them to be free from the Egyptians. But they turn back and they see Pharaoh's army. And their hearts falter. Their faith in God isn't there yet. Moses has got to get them there, and he's trying to get them there. And this is one of those moments where God provides. Yes, God provides in the physical, miraculous moment of the water splitting apart so they could walk on dry land and escape the armies of the Pharaoh. That's incredible. God provides. But he's also providing them a very instructional moment of, you can depend on me. You can put your trust and your faith in me. And Moses is the one that's guiding them there. Moses is guiding them there. So it's an incredible moment, but they're murmuring in the midst of this. Well, if you read chapters 14, 15, 16, 17, you're going to find that the murmuring continued. Oh, there's the bitter waters. There's the lack of waters. There's even the moment in chapter 16 in which God's given them a Sabbath, a time to rest, and yet still they work, and God's like, why? I've given you this moment where you can have a day of rest and don't gather. I provided 2 days worth of manna for you the day before. So there's this learning period that's unfolding here. Moses is leading them, and he's being very patient, trying to get them to a place of peace. Physically, yes, but spiritually with God. But even when they get to Mount Sinai, where they've literally heard the voice of God himself, they see all the magnificence of God. It's sort of a theophany that comes down on the mountaintop with the lightning and the smoke and the rumblings. They're very aware of the presence of God and the magnificence of it. And he speaks to them and says, I will be your God and you will be my people. In Exodus chapter 19. Moses goes up to receive the instructions from God on how to live and how to worship and how to follow him and how to be the people that God would have them to be and how they could be a light to the rest of the world, bringing patience and peace to them in God. But they reject this. This is like 3 months out and they reject this. And they build a golden calf. They build a golden calf. Of course, there's consequences for the people that utterly rejected God. But Moses is being patient. Moses is even reminding God of his promises and what the people would think if they were all utterly destroyed. And Moses is trying to get them to that place. He's being incredibly patient. Where would you be at this point? Where would you be at this moment? Hard to say. Probably different from all of us. But it didn't stop there. Moses often went to God for himself, but he also did it for the people because he's exemplifying patience and kindness and goodness, trying to get them to that place of peace. If we skip over to the book of Numbers, and it details some of their travels here as well. We're in Numbers chapter 11. If you look at Numbers chapter 12, what an incredible moment. His own brother and sister call into question his marriage to the Cushite woman. His patience is tested. Chapters 13 and 14, this is when he sends the 12 spies go into the promised land. And this is the moment where they should have been in faith. They should have known at this point you can utterly trust God and be his people and make those decisions that are going to cause you to draw near to him. You should have been in that place. Some of them were. Joshua and Caleb. But the other 10 spies, no, we can never take the promised land, even though God said he would provide. And even though God has been faithful at every point to here. And here we are in chapter 14. They rise up and they are turned against Moses and Aaron. They want to kill them. Can you imagine? Would your patience falter there? Especially since we know the story. There's going to be 40 more years of wandering in the wilderness. In your head, when you hear God make that statement, 40 more years, would you have said, no, God, these people, my patience is expired. But not Moses. Not Moses, because this is God's plan, and not Moses. Because his care for the people to get them near to God was paramount, and because his vision was to have God's vision, and so he presses on. Perfect? No. But aspirational for us? Incredible. I find this incredible. Because Moses is trying to show them what life in God should look like, must look like, to fulfill his expectations. But look at chapter 16. I want us to spend a little time in chapter 16 to see the extent that he is absolutely tested. This is some years on after the spies. But there are some people in chapter 16 that are again calling his leadership once again into question. And it's because their hearts are still in Egypt and not on God. The language attests to it. So it's Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. They rose up in verse 2 before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, you take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them. And the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? They're making a move for position. And at the same time trying to tear down Moses and Aaron. Well, patience. How do you handle such a situation? Moses takes it to God. Moses heard it, he fell on his face, and he spoke to Korah and all the company, saying, tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. That's the goal, be near to God. In spirit, in identity, in character, and nature. Be near to God. In purpose and intent, be near to God. And God's been providing for that. And Moses is keeping it on message, and Moses is keeping it in the right direction. Oh, the patience. Every time he's tested. That the one whom he chooses, he will cause to come near to him. Verse 6, do this, take censers, Korah and all your company, put fire in them and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourself, you sons of Levi. Well, so it unfolds. Moses then calls them out a little bit more. They don't appreciate the position that they've been given to be able to serve and the capacity they have for the people, to be able to serve in the tabernacle of God. What a great honor. Not enough for them. Moses points out in verse 11, you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. He's giving them the warning, telling them, You're off track here. This is not the path that leads you to God. It's selfish in what you're doing. Then Moses in verse 12 sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they said, we won't even come up. We will not come up. This is great conflict. Well, in verse 20, God's going to solve the issue. And he says to Moses and Aaron, separate yourselves from among the congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Then they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin and you're angry with all the congregation? So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Did you catch that? How is your patience not so tested? How are you not pushed to the edge when all these people are opposing to you? And so the possibility that this could end and they're all gone, it could be tempted to let that into your mind, but they're still speaking on behalf of the people. They're still trying to be there for the people at all. And God listens and tells them to separate. And so Moses and Aaron tells these people to get yourselves away. Get yourselves away. You don't want to be near them in any way whatsoever, whether it's Korah or Dathan or Abiram. So the congregation listens and they separate. And then God communicates who his people are. There's consequences at moments, especially for rebellious hearts. There's consequences when people reject God, of course, because they wouldn't listen. Their hearts were still in Egypt. So they reject the Lord. The Lord opens up the earth and they are consumed. And you would think, oh, now the people can see these are the holy men that we should be following. This was God's will and this is God's order. And they should have taken this as an opportunity to draw closer, nearer to God. But they don't. They further test the patience of Moses and Aaron. It's incredible. On the next day in verse 41, the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, you have killed the people of the Lord. Now it happened when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron that they turned towards the tabernacle of meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it. And the glory of the Lord appeared. And Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of meeting. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. And they fell on their faces. And Moses said to Aaron, take a censer and put fire in it from the altar. Put incense on it and take it quickly to the congregation and make atonement for them, for the wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun. So, of course, Aaron responds and he goes out and he stands between those that had died and those that are living. But even at this moment, the next day, they are still looking for the way for the good of the people. The patience is extended. The love is extended. It's incredible to me. And 40 more years to go. How impressive is that? I think it's instructional. I think it's aspirational. And you may be saying, that's lightweight patience. Tell me your secret. It's expectation. That's useful for us today. Because if we take these, and there are other stories that Moses gives us a large span of time to look at, and we start seeing that this was a regular part of his life, a regular thing that he engaged in, and we can see that the way that he would have developed and he would have further exemplified it, that's useful for us. Moses and his use of patience, it led to peace. Not everyone would adhere to it, but many did. And there's a tremendous amount of people that came out of his leadership. Can you imagine Joshua, who took over the mantle after Moses, and he knew all of these accounts, and as he was his assistant, he knew all these encounters. God says, it's your turn. No wonder God said, be strong and have good courage with him. To pay attention to Moses and the leadership that he had and the patience that he gave the people, constantly looking for them to be God's people and leading them there. Well, what do we do with these examples? How do we use these examples today? Well, there's a couple things, three things I want us to focus on. The way that you can take this and think about it. Read these stories in the scripture for sure, but then ask yourself, how do I get to that point? How do I get to that point? And if I have this level of patience and this determination for peace, how do I give that to the world that it may change someone's life for the better? First thing that we learn from this is that your faith feeds your patience. Your faith will feed your patience. Here's what I mean by that. When we see in this examples of Moses over and over again, his relationship with God determined everything for him. So in terms of his faith, meaning that he knew God and he understood God's commands and God's purpose, and he believed in it and he trusted in it and he obeyed in it, this was his driving point, to get those people to where God wanted them to go physically. But to get those people from Egypt and into the Lord spiritually was also his drive and his point. And if you understand that purpose and you build this out of faith from God, that's a different kind of patience. A different means by which you kind of endure those things that might annoy you, and in which you deal with people and their complaints and the immense amount of people and the way they were driven against him personally at some moments. But it was driven by his faith. And if we're going to understand godly patience, and we think about those scriptures where God is long-suffering to usward, God is long-suffering toward us. Well, in what way? Certainly with Moses he was. Moses was not a perfect man, and Moses made mistakes. And God was patient with him. And we have to look at our own selves in that way. Is God not patient with me? Is God not patient with me? How many times have we fumbled? And how many times have we asked for forgiveness? And how many times have we thought, oh, I should have done this better. God, please forgive me for that. Or God, shouldn't have found a different way to think about those sort of things. And God is patient with us and gives us his mercy and his grace. And we are the recipients of that. Our faith in him that he is just to forgive, and our faith in him that he is and he has been so long suffering with us, feeds into the patience that we can give to other people. Our faith must build that. Patience isn't just an inherent quality that you either have or you don't have. It's a thing that you build and develop over time, but it must begin with your faith in God if it's going to be godly patience, if it's going to have a godly effect on the world. Faith is where that is. And Moses had that. Even in these moments when people were murmuring against him, oh, you've led us out here to die. There's Pharaoh's army. And he could have turned to God and said, Lord, these people, they just saw you deliver them with the mighty power of your hand. They saw that, and that wasn't good enough. But he turns to God. It's faith. And he obeys God. That's faith. And he does this thing that it doesn't make sense on paper. It does after you know the story, but can you imagine being there in that moment as a solution? Lift up a stick, and that's going to solve the problem? But it wasn't the stick, it was God. It was God's command to say, yep, these people are going to get there. And I'm going to be there with them, and I'm going to lead them closer to you. So he lifts that stick up. And God works in the way he said he would, and the people are freed. That's incredible. Incredible. But it was his faith that grounded his patience. Even at this moment with Korah and the rebellion, he turned to God first. And it was God's solution that he turned to as an answer for the rebellious hearts of those people. And it was God he turned to in his farewell address with the people. He wasn't perfect. Because of his disobedience with God, he wasn't going into the promised land. But he had a hope for these people, that they would. His message to them was to keep God's commands. Keep him first. Do not be like the nations that are going to be inside that promised land. Keep your focus on God. It's his faith, and his faith that grounded all of his patience. It's no different for us today. If we're going to be godly people and be the Lord and people, and we're going to help people come to know the Lord, our patience must be grounded in faith. Nowhere else, but wholly and completely in the Lord. Well, that leads us to point number 2. If your patience is going to function as it's fed by your faith, it thrives when godly quality is added to it. It thrives when godly quality. Sometimes we have a thought, I don't know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, that we take these qualities of God and we sort of separate them out, like different parts of a dish, you know. And then we'll eat this one over here a little bit, eat a little over here a little bit. I'll tell you a fun fact. Brian Dill, who was here, he won't mind. Brian, forgive me. He told you how picky he was during the Bible series as an eater, wouldn't eat vegetables. Do you remember that? You have no idea. No idea. He just scratched the surface. Here's a fun fact, because I ate lunch with him. He used to do this 15 years ago. He still does it. He does not let any food on his plate touch any other food. Okay, whatever, Brian. But then he will eat that section first, like if it's your fries, he'll eat the fries first, then he'll eat the other thing next, and then he doesn't eat and mix them up at all. I've called him weird numerous times for that. He's called me weird for plenty of other reasons, so fair enough. But sometimes we do that with the qualities of God, like we separate them out and they can't touch each other. If patience is going to thrive, it must. It absolutely must come in contact and be fortified by the other qualities of God. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4, love is patient and kind. They go together. They must go together. They have to go together if they're going to work right. Think of the way that I think about Jesus as the shepherd. And Jesus went through a tremendous amount of endurance and patience with the people when he walked the earth, just when he walked the earth. Even if you think only during the three and a half years of his ministry, my goodness, the patience of Jesus for the people that he's trying to help draw closer to God. He's going to die for these people, and he knows it. And even when they're rejecting them and they're mocking him and they're trying to oppose him, he's so patient. Even with the apostles who are trying to learn and with their mistakes, he's so patient. But it's not just patient. He's loving, he's kind, he's compassionate. He's good, he's joyous. He's teaching them, he's being there with them, he's giving them. It all works together. You can see that his followers were figuring this out, surely, is the way they would write letters. The scripture reading, which we had earlier, look at that. The way that patience is fed by these other qualities in that letter to the Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, beginning, we'll start in 14. He says, we exhort you, brethren, warn those who are unruly, comfort the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, be patient with all. If we read that verse and our focus is on patience, it kind of makes sense. Warn those who are unruly. Might that test your patience? Yeah. Okay. Comfort the faint-hearted. We may not want to say it, but could that test your patience? Maybe. Uphold the weak. Maybe. But it shouldn't. And can we work on it and work on it so that in a godly way, we're patient with all. I love the way he ended that. With all, be patient. He's mixing things. See that no one renders evil for evil to anyone. He's now given you those qualities that shape your patience. Don't be vengeful. Don't pay back with evil. Be patient with all. Always pursue what is good. That's patience, the purpose of it. To what's good, both for yourselves and for all. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing. In everything give thanks. That level of gratitude you have for God and for other people, let that feed into your patience. This is where it thrives. It thrives. For this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. And that's the same thing we saw in Jesus when he walked. These are the things that he did. Be like Jesus. That's instructional. That's aspirational. It's an expectation for us as well. And it will make all the difference in the world for the people around you when your objective is peace. With Moses and with Jesus and many other examples in the Bible, it wasn't just an isolated incident. I didn't want to look at just one isolated incident and that was it. Moses, we had a big scope of years, a long amount of service where we saw his patience. And it develops and grows. And with time and discipline, man, it gets there. And that's how it gets to the point where we're like, wow, look at what Moses did for the Lord. Look what the Lord was doing through Moses. It was his discipline. And the fact that he was constantly, daily, even the next day with the situation with Korah, driven to obey God in faith, letting his patience thrive with those other qualities of godliness, and driving it to peace, the peace that's found by being in the Lord. That's incredible. That's what we want to move towards. It builds a path to peace, both for yourself and the people around you. That can lead to a lot of good. If you go back to that picture where you think of the little boy and his face and the lady that was quite pleasant, if both of those are in the same amount of patience, which of those expressions or those responses do you think would most lead to peace? I think the neat thing about patience is we can talk about the endurance side of it on the surface, but the emotional quality of it and the spiritual quality of it makes all the difference in the world. For example, if you are patient but you're greatly annoyed and angry at the person and they see you just glaring at them, oh, I'm being patient with you, it's probably not going to lead to the best peaceful ending to that. But if you give the grace and the love of God, there are consequences, of course. We'll never cast that aside. We saw that biblically as well. For those who rejected the Lord, who stayed in their sins, of course. But that moment of constantly pushing people and developing people, then patience and peace is beautiful. You can sleep easier at night. That's good. But when you extend that to other people, that's when it's transformative. When they know you're giving them patience. They typically respond, if they're inclined towards the Lord, with a good heart and thankfulness, because they know maybe they messed up and they're trying to get better. Certainly some of the Israelites were doing that with Moses, because many were faithful, even when they went into the promised land. Even those with Jesus. Imagine the gratitude of Peter when Jesus met him on the shore with the fish. How patient was Jesus with Peter over that time period. And I don't put Peter down, because I wonder how many of us would have done the amazing things that Peter did, or even had the willingness to come to Jesus as a solution in that moment. But Jesus was so good in that. He gave him that, leading to a peace and purpose in life. So today, when you find your patience being tested, you have an opportunity to change someone's life. They might deserve you yelling at them, but you may choose to love them instead. They may mess your order up later today, and you go like, oh, these people, this restaurant, I can't stand it. Hopefully not going, oh, the person who cooked my meal, and you're at your house. Be forgiving. You have an opportunity to give love and patience and build for peace. Doesn't mean there's not some correcting in there where it's necessary. It doesn't mean we let everything just slide without, recognizing when wrong is wrong. But it means you have a chance to give. And if we have more people bent on peace, then we have a greater opportunity for that to exist in our lives and in our world. And I promise you, I would much rather have peace than drama and turmoil and all that comes with it. And I would also much rather have the patience of God thriving, because so many other qualities of God are feeding into it. And that becomes our normal in our community and in our families and in our friendships. How magnificent would that be? And if all of that is built on truth, on the faith that we have in God from His words, how magnificent is that is, because it's sure and it's true and it makes all the difference in the world. Today, change someone's life by giving them your patience and leading them to peace. We'll close out today with an invitation. Maybe you need to find spiritual peace yourself. Maybe you need to draw closer to the Lord and you realize you haven't been where you need to be. He wants you to be there with Him. He wants you to be near. I hope that's evident in the Scriptures and all the examples that we've given. And I hope it's also evident that it's possible. It's certainly possible. Wherever you are in your life, you're not too far from God. If you turn around and you obey the Scriptures, you obey the gospel, and you draw close to Him, you're not too far away. There is hope. There's mercy, there's love, there's forgiveness of sins for those that will obey. If there's a way we can help you understand that better today, if there's a way we can clarify that in your life, if there's a way that we can help you spend time in the Word and draw closer to the Lord, please let us do that. That is where you will have peace, and no other place than our Lord. If there's a way we can serve you, let us know as we stand and as we sing.